I could hear the heart monitor beeping in the silence of that cold hospital room, each sound echoing like a ticking clock, counting down the last moments of my life. My chest felt heavy, as if bricks had been laid on it, and I struggled to breathe. The nurse had told me they called my children. She had placed the phone down gently and whispered to another nurse, thinking I couldn't hear. They said they can't come. They're at a party. A party! My daughter-in-law's birthday party! Even as the IV dripped into my arm and the machines tried to hold on to what little strength my body had left, those words cut me deeper than the pain in my chest. They knew this could be my last chance. The doctors had told them, but they still said no. I lay there staring at the white ceiling, tears sliding silently down the corners of my eyes, not from fear of dying, but from the realization that I had raised children who didn't think their mother's life was worth more than one night of music and laughter. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I am 68 years old. I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and for most of my life, I thought being a mother meant giving every part of yourself to your children, even the parts that were already breaking. I married young, at 19, to a man named Daniel. He was a good man, hardworking, but God saw fit to call him home early. He died when I was just 32, leaving me with 3 small children to raise on my own. I remember that night like it was yesterday. I had just finished folding laundry when the phone rang. A car accident, a drunk driver. My world shattered in that single moment, but I didn't have time to fall apart. My babies were sleeping in the other room, and I promised myself I would carry both my burden and theirs. For years, I worked double shifts as a nurse's aide, sometimes triple. My hands grew rough, my back ached constantly, and there were nights I cried myself to sleep from exhaustion. But when I looked at their little faces, I knew it was worth it. Every scraped knee I bandaged, every late-night fever I soothed, every meal I skipped so they could eat. I thought it was planting seeds of love that would one day blossom back into care when I was old. But sitting in that hospital bed, I realized the tree I watered with my sweat and tears had grown thorns instead of shade. My oldest son, Marcus, is 42 now. He always had a sharp mind and a stubborn streak like his daddy. He became a lawyer, the pride of the family, though I often felt like he saw me as more of an obligation than a blessing. His wife, Vanessa, is the one with the big birthday bash that night, a woman who loves the spotlight, who measures life in champagne glasses and Instagram likes. Marcus follows wherever she leads, and if that means ignoring his mother's cries, then so be it. My second son, Terrence, is 39, the dreamer. He wanted to be an artist, then a musician, then an entrepreneur. He's been many things, but stable isn't one of them. Yet I never stopped supporting him, even when it drained me. He still comes around, but always with his hand out, never with his arms open for a hug unless he needs money. And then there's my baby, Denise, 34. Sweet, smart Denise, the one I thought would never forget her mama's sacrifices. She married into a comfortable life, has 2 children of her own, and yet she's grown distant. Too busy, too tired, always on the run. She posts pictures of her family vacations on Facebook, but hasn't brought my grandkids to visit in almost a year. I gave them my all, and now in my weakest moment, all I got back was silence. If this story touches your heart so far, or if you've ever felt the sting of being forgotten by the very people you gave everything to, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss what happens next. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know I'm not alone in this. Now, let me take you back a little so you can truly understand how we got here. I wasn't always lying in hospital beds with wires stuck to me. I used to be strong. Lord, I was strong. I had to be. After Daniel died, I learned quickly that there's no room for weakness when you're both mother and father to 3 growing children. I worked days at the nursing home, nights at the hospital. I cleaned houses on weekends. Every dime I earned went into keeping the lights on, food on the table, and clothes on their backs. I can still see Marcus on his first day of college, smiling in that secondhand suit I bought him. I sold my wedding ring to pay for that semester. My fingers felt naked without it, but when I saw him walking across that campus, head high, I told myself it was worth it. Terrence's instruments, I bought them one by one, even when bills piled up. Denise's school books, I skipped new shoes so she could have the best. Every sacrifice was a silent prayer that one day, when I was old and gray, they'd sit by my bedside and tell me, "Mama, we remember. Mama, we love you. Mama, we're here." But that night, all I got was, "We can't. My wife's having a party." The nurse came in and tried to comfort me. She adjusted my blanket and whispered, "Don't worry, Miss Carter. Maybe they'll come tomorrow." But we both knew tomorrow isn't promised to anyone, especially not a woman with a failing heart. And as I lay there, I thought about the irony of it all. How many nights had I sat up in hospitals for them, holding Marcus's hand when he broke his arm in high school, sitting with Terrence through his endless asthma attacks, pacing the halls when Denise had surgery to remove her tonsils? I never once thought of myself. I never once said, "I can't come, I'm busy." But now I was the one lying there, fragile as glass, and they couldn't be bothered. The truth is, this wasn't the first time I'd felt neglected. Over the years, I'd gotten used to the short phone calls on holidays, the last-minute cancellations, the excuses. "We'll come next week, Mama." Or "Just so busy, Mama." "We'll make it up to you, Mama." But this was different. This was final. Because when you choose a party over your mother's life, you've said it all. And in that moment, as my heart monitor beeped slower and slower, I made a decision. If God gave me another chance to walk out of that hospital, I wouldn't go back to being the mother who begged for scraps of attention. I would not let my last years be filled with disappointment. I would walk away, quietly, with whatever dignity I had left. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer, not for healing, but for peace. That night, I dreamed of Daniel. He was standing on our old porch, smiling at me, the way he used to before the world took its toll. He didn't say a word, but his eyes told me everything. "You've done enough. You don't have to keep giving until there's nothing left." When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the blinds, and something inside me felt lighter. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one.
I woke up to the sound of voices drifting through the thin curtain that separated my bed from the next patient. The words were hushed, but the tone was clear. Pity. They were talking about me. "Her kids still haven't shown up?" one nurse asked. "No," another replied softly. "And from what I hear, they said they're too busy. Can you imagine?" Their voices cracked something in me that hadn't yet broken. It was one thing to feel the neglect in private, to carry it quietly, but now strangers knew. My shame, my heartbreak, my failure as a mother, it was suddenly on display for others to judge. I turned my face to the wall, my hand weakly clutching the thin blanket. I wanted to scream, to demand why life had turned out this way after everything I had given, but no sound came, only tears. The doctor came in later that morning, clipboard in hand, his expression professional but kind. "Mrs. Carter, we're going to keep you here for observation for a few more days. Your condition is stable now, but we need to monitor your heart closely. Stress isn't good for you." Stress. That word made me laugh bitterly. How could I explain that my entire life had been nothing but stress? The long nights, the endless shifts, the unpaid bills, the hungry children. Stress was the very air I breathed. But I nodded anyway. What else could I do? By the third day, I knew my children weren't coming. Not one phone call, not one text message, not one hurried visit during their lunch break. Nothing. And with every hour that passed, the emptiness inside me grew louder, until it was screaming in my chest. I began to replay old memories, not the happy ones, but the ones that revealed just how long I had been overlooked. Marcus calling me only when he needed me to babysit. Terrence showing up only when his rent was overdue. Denise texting me on my birthday instead of visiting. I told myself it was normal, that children grow up and get busy, but deep down I knew. The love I poured into them had been one-sided for years. One night, when the ward was quiet and the machines hummed steadily, I asked the nurse if I could borrow a pen and some paper. She looked surprised, but handed them over. With shaky hands, I began to write. At first, it was just a few lines, but soon the words poured out like a flood I couldn't control. I wrote to my children, telling them everything I had held back for years. The sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the love, the disappointment. I told them how it felt to hear they chose a party over my life. I told them that if I walked out of that hospital alive, I wouldn't be waiting for them anymore. I folded the letter, tucked it in an envelope, and placed it in the drawer by my bed. That letter was my release, my goodbye. The next morning, I asked the doctor a question I had never dared to ask before. How much time do I have? He hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. Mrs. Carter, he said gently, with the right care, you could live years, but if you keep going through stress like this, well, I'd be lying if I said it won't shorten your time. Years. That word hit me like a revelation. I could live years. I didn't have to spend those years begging for love that would never come. I didn't have to wait by the phone or cry over broken promises. I could take whatever time I had left and choose differently. That's when the plan began to form. I called my old friend, Martha. We had met in church years ago, two widows sitting side by side in a pew, bonding over our shared loneliness. Martha was one of the few people who had never turned her back on me. When I told her I was in the hospital, she didn't hesitate. "I'm coming right now," she said, and true to her word, she was by my bedside within an hour. She brought flowers, her face full of worry, and when she saw the tears in my eyes, she didn't ask for explanations. She just held my hand. For the first time in days, I felt seen. I told her everything. The phone calls that never came, the party, the letter. She listened without judgment, and when I finished, she said something that stayed with me. "Evelyn, you don't owe anyone your last breath. If they can't see your worth, then maybe it's time you stop waiting for them to." That night, I prayed. Not for my children, not for my heart, but for strength. Strength to walk away. Strength to start over, even this late in life. When the doctor finally discharged me, Martha was there to take me home. But instead of giving her my address, I gave her a different one, the address of her own house. She blinked in surprise. "You sure, Evelyn?" she asked. I nodded. "I can't go back there. Not yet. Maybe not ever." So I moved in with her, at least for the time being. Her home was small but warm, filled with laughter from her grandchildren and the smell of fresh cornbread. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. Meanwhile, I knew my children would eventually come. Maybe not out of love, but out of guilt or convenience. They would show up at that hospital expecting to see me waiting for them. Instead, they would find an empty bed and the letter I left behind. And oh, how I imagined their faces when they read it. The guilt, the shame, the realization that they had pushed me too far this time. Part of me still longed for them, still ached for their arms around me, still wanted to hear, "We're sorry, Mama." But another part of me,
the part that had been bruised and battered by years of neglect, was done. Done waiting, done begging, done hurting. I started to live differently. Martha and I went to church every Sunday, cooked meals together, sat on the porch in the evening, sipping sweet tea. I joined a women's group at the community center where I found other mothers who had been through the same heartbreak. Together, we laughed, we cried, we healed. And slowly, the ache inside me began to ease. But then, a week later, the call came. It was the hospital. My children had finally shown up, looking for me. And when they saw the empty bed and the note, the nurse told me later they went pale. Marcus, usually so composed, sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. Terrence cursed under his breath, pacing the floor. Denise cried openly, her sobs echoing down the hall. But it was too late. I wasn't there anymore. And even if I had been, they would have found a different one who no longer defined herself by their presence or absence. The power had shifted. For the first time, I was the one leaving them behind. And as I sat on Martha's porch that evening, watching the sun sink low on the horizon, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in decades. My heart was still fragile, my future uncertain, but my spirit was free. I thought about the years I had spent giving and giving, hoping for something in return. I thought about the countless sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the prayers whispered into the dark, and I realized something. I had already given them everything. There was nothing left to give. So I chose to give to myself instead. And that decision, that quiet act of self-preservation, was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where I was no longer just a mother, no longer just a giver, but a woman who finally chose herself. For once, it was my turn to live.
When the phone rang at Martha's house, I almost didn't answer. Something in me knew it wasn't a call I wanted to take. But the persistent ringing gnawed at my nerves until I picked it up, pressing the receiver cautiously to my ear. "Mama?" It was Denise. For a moment, I said nothing. My throat tightened and my heart hammered. She sounded different, desperate maybe. I had spent so many nights longing to hear her voice softened with care, but now that it was here, it felt foreign, almost too late. "Mama, where are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why?" I finally whispered, my voice low but steady. There was silence on the other end, followed by a choked sob. "Because we went to the hospital and they said you were gone. They gave us a note, Mama. We didn't know. Please, tell me you're okay." I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to break down. Part of me wanted to cry with her, to reach through the line and comfort her like I always had. But another part of me, the part that had learned to survive without them, wouldn't let me. "I'm alive," I said flatly. "Thank God," she exclaimed. "Mama, we were so worried. We thought—" "You thought what? That I had died alone?" My voice cracked, sharper than I intended. "You didn't think enough to come when it mattered. The doctor called, the nurse called, and you chose a party." "Mama, please, don't say it like that," she pleaded. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that," I cut in. "I was lying in that hospital bed, thinking every breath might be my last, and my children, the very ones I sacrificed my life for, told the nurse you couldn't come because your sister-in-law was cutting a birthday cake? You made your choice, Denise. All of you did." Her sobbing grew louder, and for the first time, I didn't rush to soothe her. I let her cry, let her feel the weight of her own decisions. I had carried their guilt for too long. "Mama," she whispered, her voice breaking, "please, we love you. We were wrong. Don't leave us like this." I swallowed hard, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. "I already left, baby. The night you left me to die, I made my choice too." I hung up before she could respond, my hand trembling as I placed the phone back on the hook. Martha watched me quietly from across the room, her eyes full of concern. "They'll keep calling," she said softly. "I know," I replied, my voice hoarse, "but I don't know if I have anything left to give them." And sure enough, the calls kept coming. Marcus, the next day, his voice cold and controlled as always. He didn't apologize. Instead, he tried to reason. "Mama, you're being dramatic," he said, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "We didn't know it was that serious. You should have told us." "The doctor told you," I snapped. "Well, they made it sound like precaution," he insisted. "The Nessa's party had been planned for months. It was important to her. I had obligations." Obligations. The words seared into me like a hot brand. My life, my health, my very existence reduced to something less important than her wife's social gathering? "Marcus," I said, my voice trembling, "do you hear yourself? Your mother could have been gone, and you would have missed it because of balloons and champagne. You were my firstborn. I gave up everything to put you through school, and this is what you mean to me?" There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but not any softer. "You're being unfair, Mama. We all have lives now. You can't expect us to drop everything every time you have a health scare." My hands clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. "I don't expect anything anymore, Marcus," I said finally. "Not from you, not from any of you." I hung up before his arrogance could pierce me deeper. Then Terrence called a day later, and his words were no better. His tone was defensive, laced with guilt he refused to admit. "Mama, you know I wanted to come, but I didn't have a ride, and by the time I thought about calling an Uber, it was too late. And anyway, hospitals scare me. You know that. I figured you'd be fine." I almost laughed, a hollow sound that startled even me. "You figured I'd be fine?" I repeated slowly. "Terrence, I was hooked up to machines because my heart was failing, and you decided not to come because hospitals make you uncomfortable?" He sighed heavily, as if I was the one burdening him. "Mama, why are you making me feel worse? I already feel bad enough." "Because you should feel worse," I snapped, the anger in my voice sharp and raw. "You all should. I broke my back for you. I starved so you could eat. I sold my wedding ring so Marcus could pay tuition. I worked double shifts to buy your guitars. And when it was my turn, when I needed you, you couldn't bother to show up. Not one of you." Terrence was quiet for a moment, and then in a small voice he said, "So what now? You just cut us off? Pretend we don't exist?" I closed my eyes, the pain throbbing in my chest again. "I don't know, Terrence, but right now I can't look at you the same. I don't know if I can trust you with my heart again. Maybe I'll forgive you one day, but right now all I feel is the pain of being abandoned by the people I loved most." When I hung up, my hand shook so badly that Martha had to take the receiver from me. "They don't get it," I whispered, my voice breaking. "They'll never get it." And that was the truth. My children, the very ones I had poured everything into, couldn't see past their own lives long enough to value mine. The following Sunday, I went to church with Martha. The pastor preached about forgiveness, about how holding on to bitterness can poison the soul. His words stung because I wanted to forgive, but forgiveness felt like letting them off too easy. Forgiveness felt like betraying the part of me that had lain alone in that hospital bed, waiting for children who never came. After service, an older woman named Lillian approached me. She must have seen the turmoil on my face. She touched my arm gently and said, "Baby, sometimes the hardest part of motherhood is learning when to let go. You can forgive them in your heart, but that doesn't mean you have to keep hurting yourself trying to hold on." Her words sank deep into me. Maybe letting go didn't mean hating them. Maybe it meant finally choosing myself. But my children weren't ready to let me go so easily. 2 weeks later, they showed up at Martha's house. I heard the knock at the door and the muffled voices outside before I saw them.
Marcus in his press suit, Vanessa clinging to his arm, Denise with her eyes red from crying, and Terrence looking everywhere but me. My heart lurched in my chest. I hadn't seen them all together in years. For a fleeting moment, I imagined hugging them, holding them close, pretending none of this had happened. But the bitterness inside me rose up like a wall. Martha opened the door and looked back at me. "You sure you want me to let him in?" she asked quietly. I nodded, though my knees shook as they entered. "Mama!" Denise rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. "We're sorry. Please, we're so sorry. We should have been there. We should have come. Please, don't shut us out." I looked at her, my baby girl, and my chest ached with love and sorrow. But when I tried to speak, no words came. Marcus cleared his throat. "Mama, we came because we realized we messed up. We shouldn't have put the party first. But you have to understand, life is complicated. We love you. We do, and we can do better." His words were smooth, practiced, the way he spoke in courtrooms. But I could hear the hollowness in them. Terrence avoided my eyes, his hands shoved in his pockets. "Mama, I messed up. I know, but you know I love you." I stared at all of them, the children I had once carried in my arms, and for the first time I felt like strangers were standing in front of me. "Do you?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "Do you really love me? Because love shows up. Love sacrifices. Love doesn't make excuses. I showed up for you every time you needed me, and when it was my turn, not one of you walked through that door." They fell silent, the weight of my words filling the room. Tears blurred my vision as I shook my head slowly. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same. I don't know if I can trust you with my heart again. Maybe I'll forgive you one day, but right now all I feel is the pain of being abandoned by the people I loved most." Denise collapsed into sobs. Marcus clenched his jaw. Terrence muttered something under his breath. But I didn't move towards them. For once, I stayed where I was. For once, I chose myself. And in that silence, I knew this was only the beginning of a reckoning my children never expected.
I sat in that hospital bed, the silence around me louder than the beeping monitors and the shuffle of nurses' feet in the hallway. My body was weak, my chest tight, and yet the heaviness pressing on me wasn't just from the illness. It was from the knowledge that my own children had turned their backs on me when I needed them the most. I had given life to them, poured everything into raising them, and now, in what might be my last moments, they had chosen laughter, music, and a daughter-in-law's vanity party over my very breath. That thought kept replaying in my mind, cutting deeper each time like a dull knife. I remembered the doctor's face, so sympathetic, when he said he'd called them. "They said they can't come. Something about a party," he muttered, almost embarrassed to tell me. My heart had clenched, not just from the illness, but from shame. Shame that the people I had defended, prayed for, and sacrificed for could dismiss me so easily. And yet, a part of me, a foolish part of me, had still hoped they would walk in. But they never did. The night was the worst. Every creak of the door made me jolt, my heart skipping in foolish anticipation, thinking perhaps it was them. I imagined my son's face, his tall frame walking through with guilt in his eyes, or my daughter dropping her bag and rushing to my side. But it was always just a nurse, adjusting my IV or taking my vitals, and each time the disappointment grew heavier until it felt like I was sinking. By the fourth day, I stopped asking, stopped waiting, stopped hoping. When the nurses asked if anyone would be visiting, I forced a smile and said, "They're busy. My children have their own lives." The words came out steady,
But inside, I was breaking. Busy? Too busy for their mother's last breath? Too busy to show the bare minimum of love? The world had turned so cold, and I was left to shiver in it alone. Lying there, I thought back to the years when I was the one running from hospital to hospital for them. My eldest son, David, broke his leg in high school, and I sat for nights by his bedside, feeding him soup and praying for quick healing. My daughter, Ruth, had that bad case of pneumonia when she was a teenager. I didn't sleep for a week, fearing she'd stop breathing in the night. Even when they were grown, I showed up for them. When David and his wife had their first child, I cooked meals, cleaned their house, and helped with the baby. When Ruth had money troubles, I dug into my savings to make sure she wasn't homeless. So where were they now? I remember whispering one night to God, tears rolling down my wrinkled face, "Lord, why give me children if they will abandon me like this? Did I fail them somehow? Or are their hearts just that hardened?" The room swallowed my words. No answer came, and I lay there broken, wondering how a mother's love could be so easily forgotten. Then came the moment that burned me deeper than anything else. The doctor, worried about my declining health, told me plainly, "If they don't come soon, they may never see you again." I told them this. I told them this could be her last chance. And they still didn't come? That sentence lodged in my soul like a thorn. I imagined them at that party, dancing, laughing, raising glasses of wine, while I clung to life, alone. Did they even think about me? Did guilt prick them when the doctor called? Or did they just shrug, saying, "We'll go later," as though I was nothing more than an errand they could run when it was convenient? The bitterness began to fester. My heart, once tender with longing for them, started to harden. I realized then that I couldn't keep waiting, couldn't keep giving all of myself to people who wouldn't give me even a fraction in return. I had to face the truth. My children loved their own lives more than they loved me. On the 7th day, something in me shifted. I had grown stronger physically, my body was fighting back, but my spirit was tired. I sat up in that hospital bed, staring at the sunlight spilling through the blinds, and I thought, I need to leave. Not just this hospital. I needed to leave behind this cycle of waiting for them, this endless ache of disappointment. That's when the plan began to form. I asked the nurse for paper and a pen. My hands trembled as I wrote, each word bleeding with years of pain and sacrifice. I didn't know if they would ever truly understand, but I needed to make them face what they had done, or rather, what they had refused to do. The note was simple, but sharp. You had your chance. When I needed you most, you chose not to be here. I cannot continue to wait for children who treat me like a burden. By the time you read this, I will be gone. Don't look for me. Don't call. Live your lives as you see fit, but without me in them. I signed it with my full name, almost as though reclaiming my identity. Not just Mom, not just the woman who had given everything, but me, a person in my own right who deserved better than neglect. The next day, with the help of a kind nurse who understood my pain more than my own flesh and blood did, I arranged my discharge. I told no one where I was going, not even the doctor who had begged me to reconsider. My body was frail, yes, but my spirit was determined. I was not going to give them another chance to trample my heart.
As the nurse wheeled me out of that hospital, the air outside hit my face like a baptism. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. Not free of illness, but free of the prison of false hope, free of begging for scraps of love. I checked into a small guest house miles away. Paying cash, the woman at the front desk looked kindly at me, asking if I was traveling alone. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and she didn't press. That night, I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, staring at the clean sheets, and whispered to myself, "They will come. They will read the note. And when they do, they will know what it feels like to be abandoned." And so I waited. Not for them to arrive, but for the silence that would follow when they finally saw the empty hospital bed, the folded sheets, and the note resting like a dagger on the pillow. I imagined their faces pale, their laughter choking in their throats, their excuses drying up. I pictured the guilt clawing at them, making them squirm. And though I never wished pain on my children, I knew they needed to feel this one. It was the only way they might ever understand the depth of what they had done. Because sometimes the only way to teach people the value of love is to show them what life is without it. And for once, I was choosing myself.
The hospital room was quiet when they finally arrived, a week too late. I wasn't there anymore, only the echo of what had been left behind. The neatly folded sheets on the bed, the IV pole standing tall but empty, and the note I had written, resting on the pillow like a final message carved into stone. The nurse told me later what happened, though I can already picture it in my mind. David walked in first, his wife clutching his arm as if she were the one sick. Ruth trailed behind, still dressed in the shiny outfit she had worn to that ridiculous party, her makeup smudged from a night of laughter and dancing. They came in with smugness at first, certain they could just waltz in and have me smile with relief at their presence. But when they saw the bed empty, that smugness melted into panic. "Where's my mother?" David demanded, his voice loud enough to rattle the walls. The nurse, kind and steady, looked him dead in the eye and said, "She's gone." I can imagine the way their faces must have drained of color at that word. Gone. Not out for a test, not down the hall. Gone. Ruth rushed to the bed, grabbing the note as if it could somehow tell her more than she was ready to hear. Her hands shook as she unfolded the paper. She read the words out loud, her voice breaking with every sentence. "You had your chance. When I needed you most, you chose not to be here. I cannot continue to wait for children who treat me like a burden. By the time you read this, I will be gone. Don't look for me. Don't call. Live your lives as you see fit, but without me in them." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The only sound was the paper trembling in her hands. She can't mean this," Ruth whispered, her eyes darting around the room as though I might suddenly step out from behind the curtain, forgiving as always. But I wasn't there. For once, I meant what I said. David snatched the note from her, his jaw tightening. I know him. He would have wanted to be angry, to call me dramatic, to blame me for my guilt. But the truth written in those words cut too deeply. He couldn't argue with it. He couldn't defend himself against the reality of what they had done. The nurse told me he just stood there, his face pale, his lips pressed into a thin line, holding that paper like it was a mirror showing him all the ugliness he had tried to ignore. And that was exactly what I wanted. You see, leaving that note wasn't about cruelty. It was about truth.
It was about making them see, in the most undeniable way, that love is not unconditional when it comes to respect. That even a mother's heart, no matter how wide, has limits. Meanwhile, I was across town, sitting by the window of the little guest house, watching the world go on as if nothing had changed. Children played in the yard across the street. A man watered his garden. Life continued. And yet, for me, it was the first time in years I felt a strange kind of peace. It wasn't easy, though. That first night alone, I cried into the pillow until it was damp. The love I carried for them didn't just vanish because they failed me. No, love like that clings, even when it's bruised and bleeding. But I had to remind myself, sometimes love has to let go for dignity's sake. And dignity was all I had left. I thought back to every holiday where I'd sat by the phone, waiting for them to call, only for silence to answer. To the birthdays they forgot, the nights they said, "We'll come by, Mom," and never did. And now, even in my weakest hour, when death hovered over me, they chose to celebrate a party rather than sit by my side. It wasn't abandonment just once, it was years of neglect piling up until it broke something inside me. A week after I left, I heard through a friend that they had gone into a frenzy. David called everyone he knew, asking if they had seen me. Ruth even drove to my old church, crying in the pastor's office, saying, "She can't just leave us like this. We're her children." Her children. The irony of those words stung. They wanted to claim me when it suited them, but where was that claim when I needed theirs? Being my children wasn't just about biology, it was about presence, about love, about care, and they had failed every test. I imagined their shame when people asked them, "Why wasn't your mother at the party?" Or worse, "Why didn't you go to her when the hospital called?" No lie could cover that truth. They would have to live with it, wear it like a scar. And perhaps that was the justice in it all. Because I wasn't trying to punish them with my absence, I was showing them absence is what they had given me for years. I simply returned it, one final time. The truth is, I didn't know if I would ever see them again. Maybe one day when I was stronger, when the anger dulled and the pain softened into something less sharp, I might reach out. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe the silence would remain, teaching them the lesson they never thought they'd have to learn, that even a mother's love can walk away when it's taken for granted long enough. And as I sat in that small, quiet room, writing in my journal, I prayed, not for them to find me, not for reconciliation, but for their hearts to change. Because if they couldn't even show up for me, how would they treat others in their lives? Their own children, their friends? I prayed they'd learn before it was too late for someone else. But I knew one thing for sure. They had lost me. At least the version of me that waited, hoped, and forgave endlessly. No more. The next time they thought of me, it wouldn't be as the mother waiting by the window for her children to visit. It would be as the woman who finally said enough. I imagined them holding that note, reading it over and over, the words echoing in their minds. I hoped every line haunted them, not to cause pain, but to spark change. Because sometimes guilt is the only teacher stubborn hearts will listen to. And as for me, I began to dream of something I hadn't dared in years. Freedom. A life where I wasn't defined only as someone's mother, but as a woman with her own worth. I thought of moving to a quiet town where no one knew me, maybe volunteering at the library or joining a church where people saw me, not just as background, but as someone of value. It scared me, but it thrilled me too. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't living for them. I was living for me. And maybe, just maybe, when they finally realized what they had lost, it would be too late for them to undo it. Because while life can be forgiving, time never is. And the time they owed me, the time they stole from me with their neglect, was gone forever. So let them sit with their guilt. Let them remember that empty hospital bed, the folded sheets, and the note on the pillow. Let it eat at them. Remind them of the mother they pushed away. Because sometimes the hardest lesson children can learn is that parents are human too, that we break, that we bleed, that we leave. And I had left them behind.
If this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder. Don't wait until it's too late to show love to the people who gave everything for you. Parents may seem strong, but they carry silent wounds. And one day, they may choose to walk away if those wounds are never healed. So hug your mother, call your father, check on the people who once checked on you when you couldn't stand on your own. Love is not promised tomorrow. If you felt something in this story, please like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Leave a comment down below and let's keep this conversation alive. Because sometimes the stories we share are not just entertainment, they're lessons we can't afford to ignore.